Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries. Imagine being trapped in a flimsy, 13-foot wooden rowboat, completely alone, over 1,600 miles from the nearest land. That was the reality for the crew of an English yacht called the Mignonette. In July of 1884, a sudden storm destroyed their ship, forcing them to abandon it with almost no provisions. They had 0 fresh water and exactly 2 one-pound tins of turnips. Inside that tiny dinghy were 4 men: Captain Thomas Dudley, his mate Edwin Stephens, a seaman named Edmund Brooks, and Richard Parker, an inexperienced 17-year-old cabin boy on his first real sea voyage. In an instant, the crew was violently stripped of civilization. They were thrust into a brutal environment where human endurance isn't measured in days, but in hours. The physiological horror of the open ocean hit them fast. During their first 15 days adrift, they managed to catch a single sea turtle. Beyond that, they survived by drinking their own urine. Soon, their meager food supply was entirely gone. In situations like this, starving sailors historically relied on an unspoken tradition known as the custom of the sea. The rule was pragmatic. The crew would draw lots and sacrifice one person so the rest could eat them and live. On July 20th, a fatal mistake forced the issue. Richard Parker, the young cabin boy, broke down and gulped seawater. He immediately fell violently ill, eventually slipping into a coma in the bottom of the boat. At this point, the men were totally isolated. The laws of society no longer applied, replaced entirely by the merciless arithmetic of survival. By dawn on July 25th, they had been drifting for 20 days. With no rescue ship in sight, Dudley and Stephens began whispering to each other. They agreed to commit the unspeakable. Brooks, the third crewman, refused to take part. Dudley offered a quick prayer for forgiveness. He leaned over the comatose boy, whispered that his time had come, and struck his jugular vein with a penknife. The men caught the spurting blood in a bailer and drank it. To stave off immediate death, they stripped the body, cut the boy open, and consumed his heart and liver while they were still warm. Just 4 days later, a passing German ship spotted the dinghy. The 3 survivors were hauled aboard, with blood caked under their fingernails, the bottom of their boat strewn with the gruesome remains of Richard Parker. The men had survived the Atlantic by committing a terrifying act. In their minds, staying alive fully justified the extreme methods they used. When the rescue ship brought them back to England, Dudley and Stephens didn't hide it. They openly and honestly confessed to the cannibalism, expecting the standard public sympathy usually afforded by maritime custom. But the British Home Office had a different agenda. Determined to eradicate this savage custom, the government arrested the survivors for murder, intent on making a public example of them. The resulting trial in Exeter became an intense, highly scrutinized spectacle. But ironically, the public consensus actually sided with the starving sailors. Fearing a sympathetic local jury would acquit them, the presiding judge laid a legal trap. He forced the jury to return a special verdict, meaning they only established the facts of the shipwreck, but kicked the actual decision of guilt up to the highest judges in the land. The survivors thought they had defeated the elements. Instead, they found themselves used as pawns in a proxy war between ancient maritime tradition and modern legal civilization. The final judgment took place in London, at the formidable Queen's Bench Division. The panel was led by Lord Chief Justice Coleridge, a judge with an uncompromising philosophy regarding the law. His ruling was explicit and absolute. Extreme necessity and the instinct for survival are never valid legal defenses for murder. Coleridge argued that while preserving your own life is generally a duty, sacrificing your life to protect the weak and vulnerable is a much higher moral calling. He warned that if the law allowed a necessity defense, it would quickly become a legal cloak for atrocious crimes. The court legally declared that no individual has the authority to arbitrarily assign value to their own life over the life of an innocent. Dudley and Stephens were sentenced to death by hanging. However, acknowledging the horrific duress the men faced, the Crown quietly commuted their sentences to just 6 months in prison, but the precedent was set. This single case established a permanent, unyielding boundary in global criminal law regarding murder and survival. The trial connects directly to modern ethical debates like the trolley problem, forcing us to ask if it is ever truly right to sacrifice one person to save many. The law's answer in this case is that it absolutely refuses to do utilitarian math with human life, and that leaves us with a haunting paradox. The law demands that we uphold absolute moral standards, yet those are standards that we ourselves might be entirely incapable of reaching if we were starving in the dark on the open sea.